So before I even start, for those who don't know, I'll say that our textbook is funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So if you didn't know that, that's who paid for promoting me. Okay, so in the last 30 years, philanthropists like Bill Gates have taken up a business model for their philanthropy. There's an investment and a required return. So people like me and you become dehumanized and because they turn into commodities. So some people call this venture philanthropy, comparing it to venture capitalism. Others have titled it philanthrocapitalism. Whereas liberalism in the past brought us more equality for, say, women and minorities, this new class of billionaires has what we call a neoliberalist philosophy that says all public services, schools, hospitals, etc., should be privatized because, as they think, the free market, left to grow infinitely on its own, is the best thing for humanity. So I don't agree. The Gates Foundation has applied this business model to education, and it's been a disaster that has been opposed by teachers all across the nation. Bill Gates himself, who the critics point out is not an expert on education, he himself said, quote, "Many of the small schools that we invested in did not improve students' achievement in any significant way," end quote. So neoliberalism promotes more of the same, and big history serves as propaganda to promote the neoliberal agenda. And in the back of our textbook, towards around page 300, leading up to that, it says philanthropists are great, and the technology that the free market capitalism will create is going to solve all of our problems. I'll quote, "It perpetuates a history of capitalism in its later chapters that has no recourse to this materialistic perspective. Capitalism is covered in the most ideological of terms. It is not described, following numerous current historians," that's you, "as the rapacious and unquenchable search for cheap nature, cheap labor, cheap money, etc. Instead, capitalism's triumph is the march of a great idea," end quote. Because, as I will later point out, scientists disagree and tell us that this more of the same mentality and behavior is not going to save us from anthropogenic extinction. I'm going to argue my case against big history because I think it goes against our values and is going to kill us all. So I will say historically how it's similar and different to philanthropy of the past. Sociologically, we'll talk about power dynamics from a conflict perspective. And biological, we'll talk about the scientists and what they say and how it's going to destroy life on Earth. All right. Historically, in the last couple hundred years, education has been a big place for philanthropists to spend their money. Some did it to help their public image, and some because they genuinely wanted to help. Although the rich have a history of assuming that they know what's best for the poor and exercising their influence over how their donations are spent, in the past, things were very different than the way that they are today. Take our field trip, for example. We went to Griffith Observatory, which was named after the wealthy philanthropist Griffith J. Griffith. He gave the money to the city of LA to build and maintain the observatory as long as it stayed free and open to the public. We might consider that old-fashioned charity. But the power and the actions of the rich have changed drastically. As you can see by the figures in the timeline, philanthropists today have more influence because there's more money involved over the public than ever before. And I quote, "In the last 2 decades, neoliberal ideology has taken hold with a vengeance in education. This has involved describing public schooling as a business, as I said earlier, students as consumers, schools ideally needing to compete against one another, with this competition driving up efficient delivery, administrators described as entrepreneurs, and schools needing to be allowed to feel like a business. As many of you know, there's strict standardized testing and standardization of curriculum. It's central to the neoliberal agenda, in part because of the ways they treat knowledge as a commodity to be produced by experts, delivered by teachers, and consumed by students. So to close, modern-day philanthropy is a devious twist on the historical application of money in schools. Philanthrocapitalists maintain the status quo rather than making significant change to the systems that bred the inequity in the first place. For real upliftment to occur in communities, the powerful need to give up some of that power, and that seems unlikely in this environment of plutocratic autonomy. They buy out school boards and they lobby politicians to pass favorable laws, and philanthropists have declared themselves the saviors of the new civil rights movement, but parents and teachers that they supposedly help, as you can see, oppose the Gates Foundation education reform in schools. Unrestricted capitalism and free market solutions are a threat to life. Quote, "We are in the midst of the 6th mass extinction. This is real, with about 200 species becoming extinct each day." I'm not very happy about that. In its current volatile, nearly unrestricted incarnation, capitalism is an extinction-causing condition. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, recommendation suggests that business as usual must not continue if we are to mitigate rising temperatures to tolerable levels. This letter, signed by prominent scientists and intelligentsia, is in support of nothing less than radical nonviolent action put forth by this group, Extinction Rebellion. It calls, quote, governments and big businesses to take urgent and radical action. We have a moral responsibility to stand up and be counted, hold businesses and governments to account, and demand and inspire transformative change. Transformative. Bill Gates and Big History are promoting extinction-causing ignorance while promoting a billionaire's out-of-touch worldview. This curriculum is dangerous and sadistic in the level of harm it encourages. From a biological point of view, Big History promotes the end of life on Earth as we know it. So in conclusion, from a historical, sociological, and biological viewpoint, Big History can be seen as a manipulative tool of an insidious neoliberal agenda that promotes more of the same, is refuted by science, and is contributing to ongoing anthropogenic extinction. And I will close with a quote. I sit on a man's back, choking him and making him carry me, and yet assure myself and others that I am sorry for him and wish to lighten his load by all means possible, except by getting off his back. Thank you.
Questions?
Nothing? Do you guys agree?
No.
All right. Thank you.